The Republican strategy to ban TikTok comes simultaneously with GOP complaints of domestic social media companies canceling and censoring conservatives. Without a hint of irony, many of these same conservatives now rail against censorship while advocating for censorship against social media apps they worry are influenced by the Chinese. Before banning TikTok, these censors might want to discover that China already bans TikTok. Do we really want to emulate Chinese speech bans? Aren't we the ones that say it's wrong for China to ban speech, so we're going to be just like China and ban speech we're afraid of? The Vice President of FreedomWorks, John Tamny, perhaps described this situation best. Nauseating harassment of TikTok presumes Americans will be saved from Chinese authoritarianism if U.S. politicians act like Chinese authoritarians. We're going to be saved from speech if we ban it in our country. My goodness, could we think of anything more antithetical to the freedom of speech?
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host, featuring socialist Andy Lipson and writer and teacher Jessica. We are online at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find our personal social media handles as at Don Eduardo Barca and at ZKE on Instagram, and just a Twitter handle as at JHomie89. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. Thank you. All right. So today's topic will be covering two of the most prominent newsy things we figured we would partake in, share our opinion, give our take on what's happening, because as I've said to Andy previously, this is where the political discussion is happening, unfortunately, whether it be elections or it be something in Congress or something that's of the dominant story. I think that we can always step in, share our take, and hopefully persuade. Like, there's another area that people can see us. And what are those two things that I suggested, and then you two spoke? I think it was this past weekend. But the suggestion was that of TikTok ban TikTok ban and Trump's indictment. It seems Trump's in the news because of all the things that have been discussed over, whether it's a political move or not. I just think it was important for us to cover it, since, it's like so much to unpack right there alone. So I don't know if you two want to say something besides what I just said, add to it.
Well, I was sort of reluctant to talk about this Donald Trump thing, but it is taking up literally all the oxygen in the room. So let's go ahead and get into it. And, Eduardo, when you first mentioned it, she said, we can talk about Trump, or I want to talk about the TikTok thing. And I hadn't been paying as much attention to that as I should have been. And that, for me, not just the TikTok thing, but the Restrict Act, which is really what's coming up behind it, that is gigantic. So I do want to talk about both, because the Trump thing, I don't entirely know what to make of it. Certainly there's theater going on, but there's something to talk about in both these. And the Restrict Act, I definitely want to talk about.
Well, and at the risk of jumping straight into a conspiracy theory, it's a fast news cycle always, but is it like a coincidence that these things are happening at the same time? Because I think probably a lot of our listeners will agree with me that I think a lot of the Trump shit is a huge distraction and energy harvest. And yeah, at first I was kind of reluctant to talk about it too. Even if it was just to argue that, like, don't spend your energy at looking at this. There's actually scary shit going on with the Restrict Act. So I think they are connected in a way, whether it's intentional or not, whatever. But there's a.
And I know, Eduardo, I kind of suggested in the beginning of this episode, like, Eduardo, do we want to talk about these both at the same time or different? But for me, what's coming up is maybe if we could just talk a little bit about the Trump stuff and then get into the Restrict Act and TikTok. then, but I think maybe that's the way to go.
That's fine. That's fine. So again, let's do that. So the way I see all of this is just, I don't think I said the topic, but this is pure hypocrisy that I continue seeing from the liberal left. I feel that the discussions on prosecuting a president, slight whispers of discussions that, or in like the media, or even like just major prominent figures about prosecuting the president, whether it be Obama, right, or whether it be Bush or Clinton for that Bosnia war, where it's like, you told me that was one of the most pivotal wars, I think it was, Andy, if I'm not mistaken, that changed the way you thought about things. Because, and I'd like you to actually say something about that right after I'm done here, just how it changed you, because what these people do, the crimes, the war crimes that a president does, it is so easy for people to call for war in the name of protection or whatever. It is so easy for us to just say, oh, let's just vet people at the border or jail people or, imprison them. And it just, to me, as we had just not, as we've commemorated the Iraq war, no, it was Afghanistan, I think it was. Well, the 2003 anti-war movement that just happened in March, excuse me, as we commemorated the 2003 anti-war movement, and I remember being just a freshman in high school and going out and walking out of school. It was always a discussion about taking impeachment proceedings against Bush. It was always discussion. So for you, it might have been that war during the Clinton era. And it's not like I chose it to be a Republican or Democrat. That was, to me, what was here in San Francisco the most visual, optically, and also the most constant conversation that was happening in the Bay Area about impeachment proceedings against Bush, and also like having a resistance towards this war. And I think about those things that are heinous, horrible, horrible things. And here we are discussing Trump for what, like payment, hush money towards Stormy Daniels. No, I would like to see Trump indicted for something greater than that. I would like to see all these other presidents indicted. Maybe it is, hopefully, an opening to now indict presidents. This is the first major president. Who knows? Maybe it isn't. So that there was, when there was a discussions about considering impeachment proceedings against Bush, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi steadfastly refused to even consider it. And when Barack Obama first took office, as well, there would be like discussions around going after Bush and Cheney. And Obama had said, we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards, And it's like when Obama went after the people in Syria, and he was given an award for the Peace Prize Award. It's like, these are the things I keep seeing, that history has proven that there are real criminals that I don't think that we're looking at. And it's just these, what I think are politically motivated reasons to go after Trump. I don't like Trump. I don't want to confuse anyone to think that, because I don't like his arrogance. I don't like anything about his personality. I don't like how arrogant. It's the word is, what do you call someone who's narcissistic? And so I just don't like it. But I also know how to watch myself and say, you know what, this is something else other than political. This is a political move, but so that's why I thought it was important. Uh, I could discuss like I had here my list of things that the things that have been like the war crimes I mentioned by Bush and Obama, right? Uh, but I don't want to go into it without. I could say a few things, but I just want to give someone else a chance. Those are to me like the most critical things, because my heart like goes out to just millions of people that have suffered because of war games that big players take onto the world stage, messing with people's lives and innocent lives in the crossfire of it all, just to take over territory and to take over for oil or for expansion of imperialism, which to me angers me, and I just feel that is what I would have always liked, even if we did do what is it what's the I forget the international court. No, none of these like northern uh, hemispheric countries are prosecuted, except for the southern part of the south part of the hemisphere prosecuted, like in Latin America or in Africa, for being criminals. And then they're taken to the international court and prosecuted, but it's blocked from doing it in these first world countries. So that's what came to mind for me.
Yeah, like we could detail war crimes of pretty much any president, certainly in my lifetime, including Trump. So I mean, I think this is already kind of what you're getting at, but it's like Trump is a criminal, but of all the things that you're going to charge him with, it's not war crimes. It's not the persecution of Julian Assange, right, who's being tortured under the Espionage Act, right, which he refused to pardon Assange. It's not for assassinating a foreign general. It's not for bombs on civilians. It's not for Operation Warp Speed, which people forget, especially Republicans, was Trump who launched that. It's this fucking, like, essentially like a clerical, hush money. It didn't even come from campaign funds. It's absurd, and I mean, am I right that this is like the first time that a US president, even like current or former, has been actually charged with a crime? I know there's been like impeachment, but I mean, that's remarkable. And it sounds very grand when you read the New York Times headlines of like, what is it, 30 something, 34 felonies, right? Which I don't know how deep we want to get into the sort of nitty gritty of it. Like, to me, it feels purposefully convoluted, but like, I mean, essentially, right, it's sort of I don't know, like a clerical cover up, right? That he didn't report this hush money, which is typically classified as a misdemeanor, but they've escalated it to a felony and 34 felonies because, essentially like, well, he reported it here and on this paper and on this paper, right? It's not really 34 different things. And my understanding, and I haven't really gone super deep into it, but is that essentially the only reason they escalated it to a felony is so that they can have a longer statute of limitations. So anyway, it's just, the whole thing is just so convoluted, such an energy suck, like I said. I do believe that it's completely politically motivated. I mean, it's kind of an election strategy on both sides, because I think it's making the witch hunt even more like salient to Republicans and people who lean, toward voting for Trump. And it's going to go on. I mean, this thing is going to, like, even just to have a trial is going to take months. So it's going to drag on and on. It's going to be in the headlines for ages. And then obviously from the Democrats' point of view, this is like their favorite election strategy, is just like not Trump. Yeah. So ugh, just
Yeah.
insulting on so many levels. And yeah, I would love to see him charged with a crime, a war crime. That would be
And I
legit.
meant to. Uh, sorry, did you adjust? I meant to say the International Criminal Court (ICC) that
Oh, yeah.
was blocked from coming into this country. Anyhow, that was. I just looked up here. Yeah, Andy.
Well, I guess I would say certainly would not like to see him charged with a crime, not from this state, because to me it looks like the further concentration of power within the state. So it doesn't even make me. This doesn't even make me feel, quote, safe or even safer. So I'll just say this: the one thing this is not is bringing power to justice. No, it is definitely not that in any way, shape, or form. I would probably say I think of this as power centralizing itself even more firmly in the U.S. state. That is one thing I suspect. My first thing is I don't actually know exactly why this is going on, except to say it has nothing to do with justice. It has nothing to do with anything that's positive for workers in this country or any other country. And at best, it's a distraction to make us pay attention to this while other things are going on. Things are not going well for the United States and Ukraine, and Russia and China. This Restrict Act is definitely newsworthy and definitely worth talking about. So it could be a distraction from that. So there's that element. I would tend to say that this is elections, a kickoff to the election season. And it will have the net effect, which I think is very good for the ruling class, of pushing Democrats into the Democratic Party and Republicans into the Republican Party. It's going to have the effect of what people call polarizing things. But it's like there's not a major difference. Poles mean there needs to be a difference, a North Pole and a South Pole. Like the North Pole is different than the South Pole. Here, to go from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, where they both essentially have the same policies with little changes, what are we talking? It's really a gathering. It's a gathering using two hands, the right hand and the left hand, to gather everyone up into this process called the election. So I do think it's going to be very effective for that. And it will even do something to polarize people within the Republican Party around DeSantis versus Trump. So there'll be some people who are going to be more, we've got to follow DeSantis. And there'll be some people who are like, no way, we've got to go with Trump because Trump is the voice of the voiceless, because he's the guy they want to take out. So I hate the system. I want to back my guy, Trump. That's going to go on as well. But the worst part about that is everyone's going to get drawn into the election. And by the way, there's another character that fits into this, which is Robert RFK Jr., who's going to announce from out of here.
And Robert Downey Jr. is running.
Yeah, no, Robert F.
Kennedy
Jr. He's going to announce in a week or two, and that's another.
He did. I think he did.
Not yet. That was an April Fool's joke. He hasn't announced yet.
No, he did. I'm pretty sure he did. I saw it yesterday.
Okay. Well, then what I heard is coming. And so that will be another part of the election disaster for us once he gets his hat into the ring and people from the freedom movement get fooled into going into that part of it. So that is probably the largest feature I see of it, is it's election. It's an attempt to draw people's attention to the election and the importance of the election, and which is always a disaster for workers when that happens. I also do think, though, because you mentioned WikiLeaks and you mentioned Julian Assange, and I found this out recently that actually Julian Assange really became a marked man when WikiLeaks came out with Vault 7. And Vault 7 was basically saying, we can take any piece of cyber shit that we want to, and we will find that information on mostly external people, but even the possibility of internally use that against people. And what I see in this is sort of the state reminding rulers, do not get out of line. Do not think you can fuck with us, because we are going to make your life very difficult, and we can use all sorts of any piece of information. And you're right, Jessica, this 34 felony charges are really just literally someone wrote the note, someone handed the note, Someone then put it in on another piece of inventory. Like, it's literally just 34 charges for documenting the steps of how something was written down and then dispensed. And then, it's so clerical, actually, these 34 charges. It makes it seem like they've got this giant case. Really, all it is how do you go ahead and pay off hookers? That's what this describes. And how would you do it? How would it happen if your lawyer did it? And so it turns out that it looks like there's 34.
She was a hooker at the time, right? She was.
Yeah, I don't even know if they were at the time, but it's just, it turns out they found 34 steps involved in that process, and there's 2 of them. So those are your 34 felonies right there. So it's just very, I would say what's scary about this is and particularly as I sum this up with the Restrict Act, it looks like the U.S. state is doubling down on a power grab to terrify everyone and say, because it's just like they did with Trump on Twitter. We'll pull Trump off Twitter, and now we're coming after the rest of you. Personally, I think this is more a message. If there is a message being sent, it's not that anyone can be screwed, because that's going to happen through the Restrict Act. But I do think there's a message to the powerful in this, that there is something more powerful than any individual in the state, in the U.S. state, and we can take you out any way we want and make your life difficult any way we want.
And the Restrict Act, just to put a underline on your point about the sort of like polarization really just being, 2 wings of the same bird, as we always say, the Restrict Act is bipartisan. Like, there's plenty of Democrats on the, what do you call it, co-sponsoring it. I know there's a couple that have kind of spoken up and shown some criticism, but
it was introduced by a Democrat. Like, it was written by a Democrat.
It's like, you look at who's on there, and it's Democrats and Republicans. And to me, it's like, well, okay, that's when you pay attention, because that's when they're really consolidating power or exerting some sort of control over your populace, or trying to, is when it's both of them, right?
Right. And
so while everybody's over here fighting about, you don't want a Republican, or Trump's, this is a witch hunt, everybody, the whole fucking government's over there working together to hurt us.
Right. There is a myth of opposition up here, while underneath they are united in doing something that really is like as bad as the Patriot Act or the Espionage Act, in terms of the amount of powers that are consumed or that come to the state through it. So yeah.
And can you expand on this Vault 7? I've just opened WikiLeaks and I'm looking at the Vault 7 CIA hacking tools revealed. What were you trying to say? I guess I missed a little bit of what you were trying to say.
More that, like, I don't know how this information. Clearly, this information has been stored somewhere and been kept. They've had this on Trump for a long time. This is not new information. It's just a question of when it gets used. And Vault 7 is basically it was information about how the CIA empowers itself to investigate its enemies, its allies, its potentially internal people internally in the state who it thinks are a problem. And revealed in it was the CIA's ability to pretty much, reserved for itself pretty much any way it could to get information on you, it will, and it will store that information. And secondly, it reserved for its right to potentially pin information on you, put things about you that aren't even true, but use electrical means, data means, to essentially get you to create evidence of you having committed a crime when you haven't. I'm not saying something was made up here. I'm just saying that, to me, this looks like a Vault 7 kind of thing, where they just kind of kept it in reserve. They had it in 2016. They've had it for quite some time, and now they're using it. So, but this is for everyone. Like, they got this on everyone. There is not a political official out there who they don't have it on. So they all got to know this, and they all know that. Now, some people have said this is actually there are people who look at this as like, this is just to help DeSantis. Some people are saying this is intentionally to put Trump up there because the Democrats again feel they can beat Trump more than. I don't know. Maybe that's it. But to me, this is an election maneuver. It's a distraction. But I also do feel like somehow there seems to be a message in this by the, if you will, the deep state, the people who really rule this country and run this country, the institutions that really run it, is no individual gets out of line. And if you do, we're just going to do to you what we can do to Trump, but maybe worse.
Right. And just for correction, so just as in the same way that I say about like defunding the police, but really, ideally, it is to abolish the police and have own communities take care of themselves and decide how they would want to protect themselves. I do mean that in the same way about like prosecuting. I don't have faith. We've discussed this already. I don't have faith in this the legal system that we currently have. I'm not trying to say that we should prosecute Trump in the way and prosecute other presidents and give more power to. I've learned through my journey here on What's Left Alone, that this isn't the system that I'm trying to uphold. It is in that same vein that I'm trying to say, really what would happen if we were to do it is sort of discussions around what I've said about occupying and overtaking the city and and if necessary, we have to deal, whatever that means for someone else. I don't want to deal with the war criminals, that the people have a say about how to deal with war criminals. And so a prosecution, a little slap on the wrist, is not what I see or envision for Obama, for Clinton, for Bush. It really is going to take us and the people who were affected by it and their families were affected by it to decide what to do with these people who have destroyed lives. So just to be clear on that note about prosecuting and giving more power to the people, it's just like for conventional sake. Yes, prosecute Bush as well. Prosecute. Sure, if we're going to start doing that, I'd like to see everyone else get prosecuted. Of course, that's I've explained what I mean by that.
Yeah, I think we could take a note out of, like, right now in France, right? They're storming the BlackRock offices or headquarters or whatever the BlackRock building is. People holding these killers and murderers accountable, or trying to, at least.
Yeah, and to put it the same way, like probably right now, the people I'm hating the most right now are like Tony Blinken, Mike Pompeo. If the U.S. state currently turned around and started putting those people to prison, saying they were going to arrest them, or even George Bush Jr., like I would be like immediately like, no, you're lying. This is something going on. But you bring these people up before a people's tribunal after an actual January 6th insurrection, then I'm first in line to say, let's do it.
Oh my God, I was afraid you would say something like this.
I had to mention January 6th because I know how much you like when we mention January 6th.
Well, I would love to see whatever.
We are be careful, Jess.
No, but I would love to see like these former presidents held accountable, however the people decide. But it's also like, in some ways they're puppets, right? And a lot of the people who are just as responsible, if not more responsible, are not even household names.
Right.
And I would add that
that's so
tribunals to me don't seem as important as actually taking down institutions and replacing them with other institutions, like what you're talking about, going into BlackRock and just
right. Like if you take out BlackRock, you take out like maybe our whole military industrial complex, or like a fucking chunk of it. And yet there's people walking around who don't even know what BlackRock is. Yeah.
Yep.
Even as their salaries are often, part of their salaries are often like going into retirement funds backed by BlackRock and such. But
can I just, it's just, and also going after this, oh my God, we have to be careful what we are saying. We're going to get targeted, especially after reading all this stuff today about Tik ToK Ban, Trojan horse. I'll just read this. This is another thing. So speaking about BlackRock and holding them accountable in whatever way the people decide to hold them accountable. That is, I just opened Vault 7, so I just want to read these 3 sentences, three little, these are sentences. Yeah, these are. This is an analysis. The CIA malware targets iPhone, Android, smart TVs. The CIA malware and hacking tools are built by EDG, Engineering Development Group, a software development group within CCI, Center for Cyber Intelligence, a department belonging to the CIA's DTI, Directorate for Digital Innovation. The DTI is one of the 5 major directorates of the CIA. So what is it responsible for? For the development, testing, and operational support of all backdoors, exploits, malicious payloads, Trojans, viruses, and other kinds of malware used by the CIA in its covert operations worldwide. And the increasing sophistication of surveillance techniques has drawn comparisons to George Orwell's 1984, but Weeping Angel, developed by the CIA's Embedded Devices Branch, EDB, which invests smart TVs, transforming them into covert microphones, is surely its most emblematic realization. And there's more to say, but I'm not going to go into it. So thank you for indulging me there. But we mentioned about people taking over, deciding for themselves how they're going to deal with either, if it's war criminals that are not just household names, as you said, Jess, or taking down institutions such as BlackRock or the CIA. And then because we're talking about all this, I just thought, as Andy said, Vault 7, I looked it up and you were speaking how much power this CIA has. And maybe this would be a good segue for us to discuss the more power we're going to be giving to the government, to these institutions, with this Tik ToK ban, as I'll just say, but this as it's known as.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting, TikTok's not even mentioned in the entire thing. I went and looked because I've heard people say that, and I was like, let me just verify this. I did a control find. TikTok's not even fucking mentioned in the entire bill. It's like 50-something pages. So it's like another misnomer, right? They did this with what was the Florida
Gay.
Don't say gay bill.
Don't say gay.
Yeah, don't say gay bill, which like was not at all what the bill was. Not saying I supported it, but it's just like they
right.
No, like the media or the government or whoever, social media, like they pick these things up and they just exert this like narrative control in order to gain clicks, in order to gain like polarized fighting, in order to serve their own interests. So yeah, it's not a TikTok ban. It's like not what it is.
Yeah, I mean, to call the, and I'm glad that Eduardo asked us to look into this, because I was thinking of it as a TikTok thing and going after business leaders and things like that. I was like, okay, that doesn't seem good. You know, what is the U.S. up to? But it goes well beyond that. To think of it as just TikTok hides far more than what it reveals. It really is an attack on every U.S. citizen, and it's an empowering of the state to not just give a stamp of approval to the possibility of mass surveillance through the internet and through anything that's 5G connected, through your door ringer, through video games, through streaming, anything electronic, any way you can see the internet coming into your world. The state is reserving its right to surveil you on the basis of that, saying, yes, we can do it. And secondly, if somehow we are able to say that your activities through that put you as aiding a potential adversary that the U.S. state will decide, then we can charge you with a 20 years in prison or $1 million fine. I mean, it's not. So I was like, well, how is this different than what they already do? Because Edward Snowden had said, look, the NSA has a massive surveilling apparatus. They're collecting it all. Well, this really is saying we are collecting it all. We are empowering ourselves to collect it all. And now we are giving ourselves the authority to punish you on the basis of when we collect it all. If we determine through something, you can't even use a FOIA Act to find out why that was determined. You cannot use freedom of information to find out why the given secretary in these departments are claiming there's an adversary, and how they're using that adversary in some institution they have to then charge somebody with a crime internally. None of that gets revealed. It's all just well, we're entrusting you, because that's why it really reminds me of the Espionage Act. And it does, I will say, like, Patriot Act and Espionage Act occurred on the basis of a fairly aggressive World War I and 9/11, some pretty big events. You have to ask yourself, what's the big event here that's creating this? And to me, this is much more like, I do think this is about China doing stuff with Saudi Arabia and BRICS, and U.S. having trouble in Ukraine and Russia. I think it just feels, again, the U.S. preparing itself, laying the groundwork for war. Both and any external war they have must have an internal war, and actually requires an internal war that they're going to wage on its own population in order to make it happen. And that's what I see in this.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned what do they call it? The inapplicability of FOIA, which is like on the very last or second last page of it. The whole thing's insane. But then, like, the fact that, like, you wouldn't even be able to submit a Freedom of Information Act request, like, they can just do whatever they want. They can literally do whatever they want. And how would you ever even contest something under this if you can't even do this basic, exert this basic right? And just thinking about the ways that FOIA has been used, often unsuccessfully, but throughout the past couple of years, past decade, it's whatever they decide qualifies as a national security threat is going to be a national security threat under this framework, and it's just expansion of state power, censorship, narrative control.
And just to add, in the writing of the articles, they talk about a secretary being able. It's empowered by a secretary, and the secretaries they're talking about are either the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary for the Secretary of Defense, or Director of National Intelligence. I thought the Director of National Intelligence was CIA, but that's not. These are all cabinet positions, but these are like. Most of these are the same characters from Operation Warp Speed. Like, these are not, like, by any stretch. These are the least trustworthy institutions of a completely untrustworthy institution: Defense, Homeland Security, and essentially the intelligence network.
Yeah, our intelligence agencies police themselves. They investigate themselves.
Yeah,
it's so fucking corrupt.
So it's those secretary characters that are the ones who decide who the adversary is and what are the conditions under which this thing would be enacted to then charge somebody with a crime. So it's extremely, and the fact that they don't even call it Homeland Security Act, or like Patriot Act at least is like, Patriot Act, you wouldn't even know how bad it was. I find it shocking almost that they called it Restrict Act. Like, they don't even try to hide that this thing is a shackle.
So Restrict stands for Restricting the Emergence of Security Threats That Risk Information and Communications Technology Act.
How clever.
They need an editor or something. Jesus Christ.
That's good, though. So it's an acronym.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
I did not know that. Good for them. That's clever.
You mentioned the Patriot Act, which is also something I was going to bring up. I can share an infographic on the link for viewers and listeners. But I'm so glad you mentioned it, because you're right, Andy. The Espionage Act, then the Patriot Act, it's what Edward Snowden then reported on. This is NSA, this is the phone records, computer records, credit history, banking history, all things that national security letters. It was everything that was at one time private or relatively private, right? Because everything that you document or is in through some form filter through government, you have to, whether you go get your license or whatever. But the level of surveillance and obtaining information of people to be able to listen on people's calls just dramatically was increased, and no one. I mean, I remember people having those discussions, but it was discussions among people who were just in in the communities of the politics. I don't think I saw it in the mainstream media as much as until it was, or at least the left was trying to attack Bush, right? But that's as far as I saw it. Anyone could have been considered a terrorist at that time if you didn't. And then that was also for Homeland Security. The border then suddenly became so strengthened because of the of Homeland Security, right? So I'm glad you mentioned it. And here we are with this Restrict Act, and people are going to want to use this as to against China, as you have also clearly said. I don't know I forget if AOC, what her position was, because she's a prominent figure here.
She put out some little video that said she's not in favor of banning TikTok.
Yeah.
But she didn't explicitly say, like, I'm against the Restrict Act. I guess that's sort of the implication. But I've seen her, like, in the headlines as, like, oh, she's one of the ones being, like, critical of it.
Here's what I see happening, because I've seen elements of the Republican Party, the Rand Pauls and folks like that come out against this. And I have heard so-called left-wing Democrats come out against the Restrict Act. But that's a joke. That's a fucking fake, basically, because as Jessica said before, the establishment of the Democratic and Republican Party wholly support this act. So it clearly they know this is going to happen. This thing is going to happen. It's going to be enacted. It's going to be passed. And they've allowed their respective left wings and right wings to squawk like their opposition, so that again they can collect people into the election and say, if you didn't like this, we can always support right winger over here or left winger over there, and there's still chance of bringing your party back. While they use, again, Donald Trump, 2.0, this whole thing, this whole Donald Trump thing, to basically once again collect everyone into the election. So this Restrict Act should prove to anyone that there is nothing in this election. There's nothing but deciding who is going to screw you over. And don't let the critics within each party fool you. Those are just people who are allowed to squawk when they need to give the party cover, to say, if you want to, there's still a place for you here if you want to support these people on the fringes. But that's
the so-called squad, right, is like particularly guilty of doing this. Like they do this thing, right, where like they basically like have a rotating thing where, like, for one bill or whatever, one or maybe a couple of them will shout in opposition, knowing full well that like the rest of them are going to vote for it, right? And they take turns so that not one of them has to like take the whole brunt of it. They do act as like a voting block, but not in the way that people think, right? It's actually the complete opposite. They just project this facade of opposition, like being radical or more radical, when in fact, like, they always sort of maintain the status quo collectively.
Right. And I don't know for a fact, but those characters like Matt Getz and Marge, well, she didn't, but some of those characters who were raising a hue and cry about Kevin McCarthy coming to power, I have not seen them come out and be like, we're going to actually fight our party on this. Like, I don't see that. And I bet they don't. I'm kind of guessing that they don't support this. I don't know. But I don't see them coming out and saying, we're going to wage a battle against our party to take this thing down. And I think that in the same way, I don't see it. So I personally don't think that left wing and right wing, so-called left wing and right wings, operate that differently. I think they both understand when they have to get in line in their respective parties.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was going to say, the concern of TikTok is so much placed on how the way that I hear it amongst the discussions of people in my circle of people who are involved in politics, mostly liberal politics. It's always about, well, China is doing these horrendous things. Do we want to become? Do you want to be listened to or tracked like they are doing with their own citizens in China? And I say, well, like I've been, it's a good thing we're doing this subject, because today I was reading that, Tim Hortons coffee app, they tracked, there's a settlement, there's a settled with a location tracking lawsuits. They settled because this is US American app. It's like they were tracking already, even if your device, as long as your device was on, they were tracking even if the app was closed. And this is happening all the time, you know? Feels like this is the reason why I delete my Instagram, put back my Instagram, delete this back and forth. But anyhow, whenever I want to indulge there, I'm like, delete, have to bring it back. Anyhow, but so I say, like, this is already happening. Who it's happening by is what this is about, because everyone is doing their own thing. Everyone wants to be tracking. They want to make sure that they're tracking us, and not just this country. They want, because of the major ones, right? They want to, like, Facebook's very major. I forget how many Facebook users there are around the world, but they're tracking. They want to track the whole global world as much as possible. That's what this is about. It's the dominance and the competition over who is going to be tracking the most people and infesting them with propaganda to be able to control the masses. And so it's really a war about that, not so much for our safety. Yes, China does have a firewall, for, like, against Western social media. I believe that we're going to have our own firewall as well. I think we may already have there are certain things that we're not allowed to also, that, like, for example, I've never had Weibo or those things, or how would it work if we were using it here in the USA? I'd like to know if those. So those are things I'll check out. I don't want to speak like I'm knowledgeable whether we can or cannot use Weibo, but that's a very popular Apple social platform that's used in there. And again, this is all about credits and credit scores, because we'll eventually, as they're doing, like, if you're doing this to be tracked, what will this come to? We'll eventually have everything be measuring what we're doing with our own lives. So, yeah, it is good that we discussed this. I wanted to mention one more thing. The VPN, by the way, we're going to be banned the VPN. The VPN, which is what restricts people from seeing where you're how
there's so many sites that it already detects when you have a VPN on and it won't work. I constantly have to turn off my VPN to do something.
Yeah. And I just
go ahead.
Just to say that it isn't about, this is less about sending information our way, although of course they want to, they're going to restrict it. But it is about, and it's not about privacy, it's about who gets to collect the data, which institutions get to collect the data, because the US collects all this stuff. In fact, I kind of want to do an episode where we together read the Zoom privacy rights stuff. It's chilling, dude. I actually think
we're not going to be able to film on Zoom anymore.
No, we should read it and just know, because it's the world at this point. Like, this is what's happening, just to kind of know how this electronic medium is completely penetrated, is completely their means. The revolution will not happen here. Absolutely. I'm more and more convinced.
Well, Zoom's even been sued for illegal data collection and shit and spying. It's like,
but
we just went ahead anyway.
But the data collection, there is a war. And again, it goes back to the war stuff. There is a war for data collection, and it's a war for AI creation. It's a war for whoever collects the most data has the most developed AI. And that's what this is about. It will also be connected to digital currency and, like you said, social credit scores, but it is completely about who gets to invade your privacy, who gets to collect all that information about you, and how they get to utilize it.
Yeah. Well, and too, like, I just want to bring up, like, in light of what you just said, Andy, and then also, like, Eduardo talking about just how ubiquitous it is. Like, I mean, TikTok, I do fucking hate TikTok. All of the young people, at least in this country, are on it. It's
in Mexico a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that is like the number one, at least among the college student population that I talk with. Like, we talk about it all the time. Like, you know, I'll make a reference to like Instagram or Facebook, and it's like I'm like a boomer to them. It's all TikTok. Like, they're on it all the time. I went on there a couple of years ago to just like see what it was, and oh my god, like it is overwhelming. Like, I had no idea what was going on, and it, you can see like why, like, their attention spans are whack, their ability, like their sort of digital literacy is whack. Anyway, that's a whole different thing, but it does make me really angry, just like the fact that nobody seems to be protecting particularly like the young people, you know, because you everything's a fucking app now. Like, it's not just social media, it's not just like the payments for stuff. Like, you know, we were walking around San Francisco last week. Everything's smart scan, self scan, like all of it, Apple Pay. And then even in school, like they have to have an app for their advising. They have to have like Canvas has an app and Structure, right? And I have done an exercise where I went through the Canvas agreement, which is owned by Instructure. It's fucking horrible. And yeah, it's horrible in terms of privacy, but also in terms of who can take their data and then directly profit off of it in order to like either sell it to third parties, which are, some of those are probably ending up with the government, or to market ship back to them, right, based on their interests and their profiles. You know, and then also like the social, what is it, social emotional behavioral shit, like profiling in school, you know, oh, you're a marginalized student, oh, you're Black, oh, you're disabled, whatever, you have ADHD, you know, all of that shit is valuable to the people. Like, it's not just O's and ones. And it just makes me so frustrated. Like, every time I talk about this with people, I even like did a whole like presentation on, particularly on Canvas and Zoom. I think it was the first year of the pandemic, to my whole department at my previous institution. And it's like everybody was into it in the moment, and we're like, yeah, it's really bad. And then they do fucking nothing. They do nothing. In fact, they beg for more. They're like, oh, we need to add Zoom options for accessibility, even though, you know, even though we're all back in person now. It's just, oh, it makes me so upset. Anyway, I mean, we're all like hypocrites to some degree, whether it's that or wearables or whatever. Like, we could find shit for all of us, but I'm not saying don't throw out the stuff, like throw out the stuff, maybe essentially, but I don't know. Like, there's just something bigger here. You know, it's the sort of like individual fight versus like, no, our government and our corporatocracy is waging war against us. We have to fucking take them out. Like, as good as it is, like, throw away the wearable, throw away the Alexa, put the little thing over your camera, like I slide it across every time we're done here, but like more needs to be done collectively.
Yeah. And it reminds me of the fact that, you know, there's that debate over, is Bitcoin something that could be used in a freedom movement, in a free society?
Yeah.
I don't agree that I don't think it can. In fact, it is masters, you know, another piece of the masters tools thing. But I believe, I have been saying this for a while now, and it just keeps getting reaffirmed, that none of this tech is infrastructure for our future. It is all prison products meant to enslave us, and it will have to go. I really believe that when the time comes that people start to say, we want to do something to deal with our oppressors, and we want to do something together, I don't think any of this apparatus is going to be part of using it. In fact, it's going to be seen as completely, if we're doing the right thing, I believe. And I don't believe we're going to reclaim this technology. I actually believe it's going to have to be put into like a museum or something, you know, because
Dystopian archives.
You know, like the way Versailles was, you know, the beautiful place where the pictures were, that after feudalism has gotten rid of, you know, we're not making new Versailles. It's like, that's in the past.
Yeah.
It's gonna be hard. We're so fucking attached to it all.
But again, I think it's very connected to alienation. I think it's very connected to something, a feature that I do think capitalism and it encourages in us to be more and more separated from ourselves. And I think if we were doing something together and really engaged and felt like, oh, we're in a fight now, I just feel like the way we would think about things and what was important to us would be redefined in a fairly short period of time. Not like, I mean, maybe weeks even, where we would to say that thing that I thought was so important is completely not important. And my ability to be with another human and connect and contact them and work with them and fight alongside them. And it won't. We just won't. We just can't use this technology to fight them. I don't think it can. We can't even. It can't ultimately be used to organize that fight. Right now, that's the way I get to talk to you, Jessica. It's the way we can do our show and put out a message. But when the battle starts, this is not going to be part of fighting it.
I don't know if I want to be selfish here and just take a moment of my organizing effort, which is related to how I feel about organizing in person and attempting. What I do think that the issue is, Andy, today I showed up to my school waiting for. I had this great ready thing to discuss with administration, and only myself and one other mother showed up to work and collectively organize for my collective family leadership, you know? And here I am saying, we have a meeting tomorrow with administrators. We have a meeting tomorrow, and we have to talk about stuff for next year because this is what we're gonna do. And I want to start laying out the foundation for like what we're going to be doing for next year because these are the conversations. Because then I start getting ignored during the summer, and I just showed up with two administrators with just myself and one other mother. That's it. And here I was making was being Mr. Big Bad Wolf here. I'm gonna blow your little school down, but on a good way and rebuild it. And I'm huffing and puffing about how it's a lot of us and it's just two of us. And I really felt today, I felt so depressed about it. It was just, I think that's why I took this nap that I wasn't supposed to take. That feels like a waste of time to myself in my life with all the things I have to do in my life. But it's just like, oh, I know at least one thing's for sure, that I was not seen as I was not seen. I mean, I was disrespected. I'm glad. I don't think anyone was trying to make fun of me for just bringing myself and one other parent. I think they know as well that there are families that do. I have a good reliance of families trust me, and that they just are working or whatever, or they're on their phones. I don't know, but this organizing is a challenge, and is what I'm just trying to be present to. And you're right. I hope that if I do get super involved and I do have a movement, I probably won't be here with both of you. I'll have to be focused there, But until I see this ball rolling, I'm here, you know? I hope the day comes when I'll be too busy collectively organizing in person, maybe you two as well, where Jess is doing her thing and Andy's that we're not here anymore. Until that is happening, well, we're here, I'm busy, yes, but I'm busy with other things. It's not the collective work that I'm hoping that we can achieve. And when that happens, I'll be there. So, yeah.
No, I think that's a very relevant story. I think it is the story. If you're in the United States, if you're at least in California, that's the story of now for organizing.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's been the story for a while, really. Yeah, and just to go back to like the RFK Jr. thing, which I don't think it's really as big of a thing as people are gonna make out at the beginning, but it's just frustrating when you see the dissidents and the people who are sort of awake, at least to some degree, on some of the things that we talk about on here. But like the rallies where like people really show up, like in hundreds or thousands, or the actions, right? They're not like the actual radical movements. They're not like the actual radical leaders and voices. I mean, I have mixed feelings about him in particular. I do think he's done a lot of good work to like raise awareness, especially on vaccines over the years. But I mean, he's a Democrat. He's just shepherding everybody into a lane where there's no exit. Like you're not going to get anywhere. Just the same old what do you call it? Rigmarole. I don't know how to say that word. Anyway.
So I just looked up Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running for president in 2024. Yes, so apparently yesterday.
Do you want to hear okay, let me pull it up. Yeah, there was, I don't know, some idiot reporter. Here it goes. Breaking news. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announces he will run, this is yesterday, will run against Biden for the Democratic nomination. I think it's important to point out that he has propagated way too many conspiracy theories. RFK Jr. has claimed the following outlandish things. COVID and other vaccines cause an abundance of harm. Bill Gates has a hidden agenda related to vaccines and population control. The World Trade Center towers may have been brought down by controlled demolition. Suggested that the government is engaged in a secret program to spray chemicals from airplanes known as chemtrails. We have enough conspiracy theorists in the Republican Party. We don't need any more. I wrote on that. I was like, where's the lie?
Right. Yeah. But because of that, I think there are people who are going to get excited about this. I do think it's a disaster.
I've already heard people that I know, smart people, who are like, oh my God, it's so amazing. Yeah. Like, first of all, I then get fucking crushed. Like, crushed. You know?
Yeah.
Second of all, for what? Like, for what? This is not the type of organizing that we need people to do. Compost your ballot.
Compost your ballot. Exactly. Thank you. Yeah. But there might be an episode. Let's see how it plays out. I think we might want to return to this and discuss. I mean, I definitely feel like this is bad that he's doing this, and I think it's going to hurt our side, and it's going to help the establishment. Like, it's all downside. There's not a single good side to this. But I think I'd like to come back to that in maybe another episode.
Right. So let's wrap up. That was a good conversation. So.
Yes. And Eduardo, you did us right by asking us to think about this. And definitely, I'm glad I looked more deeply into TikTok, which is not anything to do with.
Yeah. I refuse to have TikTok. So that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a political podcast that's channel challenged the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests from the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast /channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. And you can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard, suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog, such as James did with Andy. Thank you very much, James. I'm going to start naming people who do contact through our blog because that is very appreciative. So thank you very much. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Jessica and Andy Nipson. We'll catch you all next time. Ciao.
Did you know I was kicked out of Girl Scouts?
As well you should. What happened?
I never really liked it because I thought the outfits were dumb and they made us do like crafty stuff that I wasn't into, and all the boys were like camping and stuff. And we went on like a camping trip and we had these little huts, and I was sitting, they're like low huts, like not tall, and I was sitting on the roof when the like troop leader or whatever, she was like, Jesse, you can't be up there, like you need to come down. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to come down. If I can't sit on this roof, I don't want to be in the Girl Scouts. And she was like, then I guess you don't want to be in the Girl Scouts. And that was like the last activity I ever did.
She just sent you home.
She didn't send me home. Like I finished.
But what I mean, like,
but then like
you got
just
kicked out.
continued you.
Yeah. So I guess technically I resigned, but it was like I was pushed out.
No, you were kicked out from non-compliance.
Non-compliance, yeah.
An early instance of removed because of non-compliance.
It's like I know the boys are like climbing trees and sitting on rooftops. Like it was like probably 8 feet tall. It was very safe.
That's a good way to start.
That's a good sign. Good start to your life.
Yeah.